Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well on this fabulous, fabulous Sunday. That's it, Sunday. Sunday, and I'm working for you, babies. I'm working for you. Because you're amazing, you look amazing, you are amazing, and just to watch this video means that you are as invested in this as I am. So, most of you will know is that we had the 48 hours documentary. I got there in the end. Documentary yesterday on the Idaho 4 case, and I know many of you do not have access to it, and I said that I would do a video, I would watch it, and I would come to you and I would let you know exactly what was going on in that said documentary. So here I am. Spoiler alert, there isn't really anything new in there. There wasn't anything that really blew our minds, and it's not going to. I'm sure eventually everybody will get to see it. There'll be clips, this, that, and the other, and you will get to see it. But what I will say is there isn't really anything new. So what can I say? It was actually done a lot better than what I thought it would be done. It wasn't very hard in the paint pushing that Bryan Kohberger is the person who done it, and it was, completely biased. It wasn't actually like that. It was a very, very heartfelt documentary that spoke to numerous family members, obviously the main ones being Kaylee Gonsalva's mum and dad, sister, and we had some other bits and pieces in the background surrounding Xana Kernodle with her sister and her dad as well. But apart from that, there wasn't any other interaction with the other families. We did see a brief clip of Ethan Chapin's family as they spoke about Ethan's smile and the tulip farm and the fundraising surrounding that. But as far as commenting on the crimes and the sort of the aftermath and the feelings, that was primarily Steve Gonsalves, and he's the most vocal person, isn't he? He's always been the one that comes out. But what I did find very interesting is that there is a clear difference of opinion between, Steve and his wife. There's a huge difference, because you've got Steve is not, I do not think he is convinced that Bryan Kohberger is the person who done this crime. That's what I took from this. He is very, very open to the, how can I say, the possibility that there is somebody else involved, that there is somebody else who could have done this. And this is why Steve is adamant that he wants cameras in the courtroom. He wants there to be this transparency, because I just think that he is not naive enough to believe that everything that you see is always as it is. And, there was specialists, ex FBI in here, the lady Fox, and she was talking about the fact that this is far from a slam dunk case. And I know there's people out there who are firmly in the corner that Bryan Kohberger did this crime. But again, what this documentary was unable to do is firmly detail the timeline of events that led up to Bryan Kohberger's arrest. It basically was structured the same as what we see, and there's this missing piece. There's this missing, how did all of a sudden the focus get put on Bryan Kohberger? Obviously, once they got the name and they had Bryan Kohberger in their sights, they were able to look into the phone records, for instance, and the fact that they believe that his phone was switched off, which was done to mask his whereabouts during that time frame, which was quite heavily pushed. But that seemed to be, apart from the knife sheath, again, the only thing that kind of was tying Bryan Kohberger to this crime scene. And another specialist on there would turn around and say it isn't always as simple as that. Like the white Hyundai Elantra, it was even mentioned on there, I think it was Fox again, she had turned around and said, was they really looking for Bryan Kohberger's car, or was the information changed and adapted to fit once they had Bryan Kohberger's name? So like I say, this was not a bias documentary. It wasn't all over the fact that Brian Koberger did this. It literally went through what we know. The details that have been placed out there, and they were very, very adamant that this isn't a clear-cut case. Obviously there's some feelings around Brian Koberger. Steve Gonsalves was asked directly about the drug situation and whether, because they wondered whether the defence would be looking at an alternative reason for this happening. I know narcotics is something that gets pushed heavily around this case, and he kind of flat out shot that down. The one thing that I did kind of think was perhaps inaccurate was the fact that, that they had turned around and said that these kids were not crossing paths with people like that. They weren't connected to people in that world, which we know is kind of inaccurate. And I want to be as sensitive as I can, but ultimately you had Xana Kernodle, whose mum was heavily in that world. And I'm not saying for 1 second that proves that this was a narcotics-related incident, but you certainly cannot 100% rule it out. It's whether you believe that what could have happened on the peripheral was bad enough to have triggered this event. And again, like I always say, if Brian Koberger didn't do it, then somebody else did, and there has to be then a reason for that. And I know that there's multiple stories out there where people are trying to connect things like the Hannah Clary situation, narcotics, and, there's other people around here. I've been getting emails over the last 48 hours. I'm sure that's coincidental. About, Showalter again, and the fact that he was a hunter. He would have had hunting knives, and, he disappeared and went over to Kenya, and he subsequently just hasn't returned. So I get it. I get why there are people who are still in the mindset of, if Brian didn't do it, could this person have done it? But like I say, this documentary was done well. It was certainly done well. Kind of just opened up on what happened, who the victims were, their connections together, and how, you had a bunch of friends who were happy together, and they were happy as individuals. They had a whole future ahead of them. I guess that the only thing another thing what I couldn't really put my finger on as being accurate was that they'd talked about the fact that Brian Koberger likely had utilised them 12 other times that he had been pinged in that area to do reconnaissance. And it was Kaylee's mum who had said that she believes that there's a potential that he had entered the house, and, that he must have known who was in the house. But this specific night was not going to tell him who was in the house. It was, in fact, would have caught him completely off guard. And the fact that there was cars all in the car park, and an abundance of cars at that, it just... something just didn't sit right. It just didn't sit right with regards to, you're still thinking about someone who is going to do this crime. Okay, they've done reconnaissance work, and you think they know who's in the house and whereabouts they are in the house, but then on this particular night, you've got 5 or 6 cars in the car park, and you've got a delivery of, the DoorDash, etc. There's a lot going on. There'll be lights going on, lights going off, and deliveries turning up, and cars out in the car. Would this person, if they've done reconnaissance and they just want to do this murder, would that have been enough to put them off doing it? But then it could be argued that maybe that's why the multiple passes were done. Maybe it was that internal argument with themselves as, am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it? If I don't do it, will I ever do it? I've got myself here. I'm here. Let's just get on with it and do it. But a lot of it was speculation. The evidence regarding what the Gonsalves family had unearthed, if you like, was just referencing the the Instagram account, which I think we covered to death right early on, and that was that there was an Instagram account that was liking Maddie and Kaylee's pictures. It was under Brian Koberger's name. They believed that it was most likely Brian Koberger's account because it seemed like an established account. But again, you just don't know. Is it possible? Of course it is. It's definitely possible. I would have to think to myself, if someone's going to be thinking along the lines of, I'm going to kill these people, would they be liking their pictures? Would they be leaving that date? Again, it just falls back into that category of, why would a student who knows about all this, knows about it, in fact, Brian Koberger, one of his lead areas, if you like, was digital forensics. So he's literally making every single mistake in the book, and he could have just been stupid. He could have been. But are we naive to just accept that and believe that that is 100% what happened? And we're saying that, yes, it's definitely Brian, because we've got to accept that he just made this abundance of mistakes and he just got out of his depth. And that's a lot to accept. That's a lot to kind of just to think, yes, I'm happy. I'm happy to say that he made all of these mistakes. He made them all, when not even these specialists on this show was able to 100% say, yes, this is a slam dunk case. Question the car, they question the phone pings. In terms of the phone pings, doesn't actually put him in the property. They can put him in the vicinity, certainly, but it doesn't mean that the white car was indeed connected to the murders at all. It could just be that he was driving around the area, but there could be the white Hyundai Elantra may not be nothing to do with this. And the DNA on the knife sheath, again, it doesn't necessarily put him there. It has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And all of these things, sadly, come with reasonable doubt. The defence doesn't have to prove his innocence. They just have to raise doubt. And with doubt, potentially comes a not guilty, conclusion, or a hung jury. And I think at this stage, with what I see and what has been brought out, this is heading towards a hung jury. And it is just about fairness now. And I do believe that that's potentially why the defence and potentially the prosecution do not want cameras in there, because they know that this is going to be heavily influenced upon what gets out there. And there is as much information out in the public arena that is going to raise reasonable doubt for both parties. But I think Ann Taylor is confident on her own skill to raise reasonable doubt. She doesn't need the cameras, but she is also aware that there will be stuff out there that's going to push for Brian Koberger being the one who did it, and that could influence the jury negatively. But the prosecution, they're going to be thinking that, it ain't a slam dunk case. And what they've got, there's doubt with it. But that's it. There wasn't a massive eureka moment, I'm afraid. I just thought I'd touch base with you. And if there's anything else that I think of, I will certainly come and let you know. But anyway, have a fantastic Sunday and rest of your weekend. And I shall catch you all in the next one.